Good evening, Baruchim Abayim Rabotai. Welcome to another edition of our Thursday night's class. Tonight's class was sponsored in memory of Barucha Bat Istam. Alei Shalom. Tei nafsha tzura b'tzura chaim megan eder inyan ul'ol tzadikot and chasidot. Amen ve'amen. Yeah, let's do it. Sorry, I was just looking at what the topic is tonight. I don't really prepare. Vayu Chayei Sara. 100 shana ו20 shana ו7 shanim shnei Chayei Sara. Rashi writes, let's translate maybe just to be fair, and the life of Sara was 100 years, 20 years, 7 years, otherwise known as 127 years. Shnei Chayei Sara, the years that Sara lived. So it seems like Rashi was bothered by, I already said, Vayu Chayei Sara. These were the amount of years that the life of Sara was. So what does it have to say again on the pasuk, Shnei Chayei Sara, the years that Sara lived? We understood. That's number one. So that was what Rashi was bothered by. Separately, we have to ask, and this is the obvious, the majority of the Mefarshim and Chumash ask this, just say 127. Why? 127. Chazal have a drasha that they learned from this. But Rashi on Shnei Chayei Sara says, Kulam shavim l'tova. They were all equally good. That's what Rashi writes. So, I'm sure in preschool we all learned about Sara Imenu's life. And I think that should bring you to the obvious question. Sara Imenu's life was anything but good for most of it. It was one big, long series of challenges. So I'm going to quote the way Rabbi Yitzchak Zilber, Zecher Tzadik Livracha. He's a rabbi in Russia, Tzadik. It's a very good book about him also, by the way. The way he asked and explained this Rashi. It says, how can you write about Sara Imenu Kulam Shavim Tova, that all her years were good? How does that work? It's not, that's not the case. She didn't have children until she was 90. That alone is a traumatic thing. Nobody should ever know. And they were constantly moving. They were in Egypt, they were there, in the desert, all different situations. Husband had to fight wars also, right? She was kidnapped and almost raped by Avimelech, by Paro, I mean. Then she was by the house of Avimelech. Then problem after problem after problem. Then there was marital issues, right? Hagar and Abraham, and originally she thought it was an idea, but then she said she's angry about it. So there was Shalom Bayit issues there too. And the whole thing was one big issue. So she had all these problems. So, and more than anything else, she had a stepson that was the head of the terrorists, Ishmael. He grandfathered terrorism. So that alone is suffering. Tzar Gidul Banim, even though it wasn't her son, but still, stepson, it was her husband's son. And so if anything, Kulam Shavim L'Ra'ah, everything was bad. But the Kulam Shavim L'Tova, Ela ma, you going to say, but when she was 90, she did have a kid, and it was a nace and a big nace. But it wasn't like that, because even when she did have the kid, Chazal say, we'll learn in next week's Parashat, that people spread rumors that Me'avimelech Holida Sara, that it wasn't a kosher child at all. So even the kid brought her problems. And then finally, the kid caused her death. Akedah, she dies. So, what's Kulam Shavim L'Tova? This is what Rabbi Yitzchak Zilber Zitzal asked, the way he broke down the obvious question on what Rashi brings down to explain the pasuk. So, he said a good shot that's really based on an idea, a very simple idea, but the things that are most simple are the ones that we like avoiding most, because that's the truth. Everything that sounds sophisticated is normally not true, and that's why we like it. People love studying philosophy because nothing's going to come out of it, or many people waste a lot of money in university and get a degree in liberal arts, and then they wonder why they can't find a job. I think that's why it's called liberal arts, because then you're a liberal, so you think everybody has to give you free handouts. It goes together. It's all, there's a reason behind everything. But I hope nobody here went to school for liberal arts, then I'm going to have enemies. But if you did, no, what should we do? It's never too late. You could still get a normal degree. So he said a good word. He said a story in Mir Yeshiva. We're talking about Mir once they were in Israel already. So he said that they had, Mir today it's the second largest yeshiva in the world, but I don't know if it was always like that. Lakewood is a little bigger. It's always a competition who's bigger, but Lakewood now surpassed, I think, finally, forever it seems like. But you have boys, and a lot of them. You have to feed them. Mir also was the first Israeli yeshiva, or yeshiva in Israel, I don't know if you call it Israeli yeshiva, but the first yeshiva in Israel that had a very large percentage of foreigners that studied there. So it's really you have to feel you're fully liable for them. They got nowhere to go. Yeah, I know today, if anybody was in yeshiva or seminary recently, so they don't understand what that means, they don't even know where to go. Go to Lechem Basar, go here, go there. No, that wasn't a paid commercial. But yeah, in the old Mir, nobody had money, so nobody went anywhere. So yeshiva had to provide. But yeshiva also didn't have money, so they tried to find the most economic way to produce edible food for the boys. So what they did was they hired 2 elderly women that were considered Olim Chadashim, whatever, that had just moved to Israel, migrated to Israel, that came from Russia. And their qualifications was when they were in Russia, they were cooks for the Russian military. So they knew how to make mass quantities of food. It was a big, powerful military. Had to feed soldiers. Soldiers are hungry, very similar to yeshiva boys. Lahavdil, yeshiva boys are Chayei Hashem, these are Chayei Resha, but whatever. The need is similar. And it was a good idea, Betsim. He had to have experience cooking for larger amounts of people and hungry boys. And they stuck him into the kitchen. So Yitzchak Zilber says that they both went through a hard time in Russia. They had a very hard life. And then they escaped, thank God, and they came to Israel. But there was a lot of post-trauma that they were carrying, we'll say. They were carrying a lot of post-trauma. So then both women used to work in the kitchen, and they were both very loyal to the yeshiva and did their job beautifully and everything. But he says the attitude was different. One of the 2 ladies used to work, and she always had a miserable face and always be frustrated. And she would say in Hebrew, "Harbe avoda, ktsat kesef." A lot of work, little paid. I don't get paid well. So she worked. She had a job. She did what she knew how to do. But she was miserable. Every day she came with an attitude. And the other one would say, Baruch Hashem, I had the schus to move to Eretz Yisrael, I'm no longer in Russia. And not just, in Russia I used to have to peel hundreds of potatoes a day, but for who? For these evil soldiers in the army and whatever, to feed the evil and support the evil. And over now, I have the merit to stand in the kitchen of a yeshiva and to peel potatoes that are going to feed Talmidei Chachamim, that's going to give them strength, that they should be able to continue learning, they should grow up to be Gdolei Yisrael. And then she used to sigh and say, I wish I didn't need the money and I could do it for free. So they both come from the same background. They both had the same life story. They both migrated to Israel. They both got the same job. They were both in the same age bracket, by the way. Rabbi Zilber said. And one stood there all day, Harbe avoda, ktsat kesef. And the other one, every day when she came to work, it was the happiest day of her life. What was the difference? The attitude. So, who decided the attitude? They decided it for themselves. That's it. That's the whole story. A person has in his ability to decide how his life's going to look. The Mela comes to Yitzchak Zilber and says, based on this idea, he says, this is what it means in the Torah. Shnei Chayei Sara kulam shavim l'tova. Did Sara have an easy life? No. Was it good? No. Kulam shavim l'tova is Sara created in her mind that she should accept everything and make it into something good. That's kulam shavim l'tova. Be'etzim it wasn't tov at all. There was a lot of hardships. But Lamaisa, she realized she has the merit to be the wife of Avraham Avinu, to be part of this great movement of spreading God's name in the world and everything else. And for that reason alone, Kulam Shavim L'Tova, she always said, oh, it's hard, it's true, this is wrong, that's wrong, but I mean, Mekadesh Shem Shamayim, so what's more important? Nothing's more important in comparison to that. And that gave her an optimistic outlook to be able to deal with all her hardships and struggles along the way. Unbelievable. Unbelievable shot. Kitzah, I think that's really the summary of life. Who has a meaningful life? One who decides to have a meaningful life, and who doesn't? One who decides not to have a meaningful life. So I saw something today, I wasn't published today, but I didn't have the time to verify if this is authentic or not, but honestly I'm saying it anyway just because I don't put anything past them, so it makes sense to me that it's authentic. And it made me think a little bit. My brother sent this to me because he thought it was a joke. I thought it was very sad. That some sort of article that this organization, PETA, wants them to, now it's the World Series game, so baseball is, people have a little bit of interest for a few days. Baseball season is long, it's hard to have interest during this regular season, but at the end, people have, the viewer ratings go up, people have some sort of interest. So, he sent me something. I don't know if it's a joke or real, but again, I don't put anything past PETA, so to me it's, in baseball, there's something called a bullpen. And other terms like that, but that's one of them. So PETA doesn't like it, because it makes people have an association that animals are a game. That's part of the nonsense that it said there. There was some more stupidity there too. If you want, I could look on my phone and see if I can find it. But yeah, they have a big problem. So what do they want to do? They want to force the MLB to change the name to Arm Barn. I'm not sure what that's different, but okay. Barn also is an association to animals, you know, Gzeir Shova. But
it's a fly ball.
Yeah, there's no way, right? But okay, so he sent this to me as a joke. But I'll tell you the truth, I didn't find it funny. I said, even if this wasn't true, and this whole thing's stupidity and a joke, just the fact that such a thing could, right? There's a very fair, let me explain what I mean. I want this to come out clear. This is important. There was once a boy in Radin who the government suspected he did something wrong, which he never did. And kids, they brought him to court. Back then the court systems were more corrupt than today. It's hard to believe that's possible, but it is. And they were going to hang him. Kill, death sentence. Chofetz Chaim Zitzal knew the boy and knew that it's all lies. And he's innocent. And he decided that he's going to go give a testimony to the judge to vouch for the boy that it's impossible that he did what they're accusing him of, and it's pikuach nefesh, they want to kill him, so it's to save a life. I don't know, there's a couple of versions of the technical details along the way, so I'm going to skip those details, but along the lines of, to the point that he went to testify even though it was Yom Kippur or something like that, because pikuach nefesh, I don't see the big deal, that's not a surprise, of course. If there's a chance to save a Jewish life, then you have to, even on Yom Kippur, it's the question. Problem is, this court case was in a different country. I don't remember which country. The Chofetz Chaim spoke one language, and over there they spoke a different language. It was Polish and Russian. And they had to bring a translator. So there were a few interesting things in this story. It is a very famous story about the Chofetz Chaim, one of the more famous stories about the Chofetz Chaim. A few interesting things. Chofetz Chaim came to court, the judge was there, he was attentive to listen. And he spoke and said what he had to say. The boy said his whole piece, and the translator was going to start translating. And the judge told the translator, don't translate. So the lawyer over there for the boy was scared. We wasted our time. The whole idea was the judge hear what the Chofetz Chaim has to say. So he asked the judge, he says, Your Honor, do you understand the Polish? So he said, no. He says, so why do you want him to translate? And if you don't want to hear what he has to say, why did you tell us we could bring him? He's an old man, we dragged him all the way here. So the judge said an interesting thing. He said, it's true he speaks one language and I speak a different language. So in conventional languages, there's something called a language barrier. If you speak English and I speak Chinese, we don't understand each other, what should we do? He said, but then there's something else. There's something called the language of the heart. And that's a universal language. He said, this old man, he meant Chofetz Chaim Zitzal, he spoke from his heart. I understood everything he had to say. That was part one of the story. Stam, interesting. But the part that I want to use to bring out the point is then there was it played out in an interesting way. That before the Chofetz Chaim gave his testimony, the lawyer felt that the judge doesn't know who the Chofetz Chaim is, so what does it help? That he has a white beard? There's plenty of people with white beards. So he presented the Chofetz Chaim. He gave like a bio speech on who the Chofetz Chaim is. That he's the rabbi of the Jew, all the Jews and this. He's a holy man. And he gave examples about how great the Chofetz Chaim is. And one of his examples, there was a few that he gave. There's one that I remember offhand, so I'm only going to say that one, is that the Chofetz Chaim once had a letter that he wanted to put in the mail, to mail somebody. It wasn't once, Chofetz Chaim mailed out many letters. And exactly the day that he was going to do it, somebody came to his house and asked him for a blessing, whatever, and he asked the person where he's from, and he was from the town that he wanted to send a letter to. Now, if he sends it with the mail back then, whatever they called it, I don't know if it was post office or not, but it was a very slow process. You never knew how long it's going to take to get there. Here, this guy is going on a train directly there. It's going to get there right away. And this was a letter that had to do with Chizuk Adas, to strengthen Klal Yisrael. So he wanted it to get there as quickly as possible. So he handed the guy the letter and said, "Can you do me a favor? When you get back home, go give this letter to this person." The guy was so happy to do a favor for the Chofetz Chaim. What could be better? He was all excited. This is the story that the lawyer is telling this judge before the Chofetz Chaim gave a testimony on this boy. And okay, the judge is listening. Well, this doesn't sound interesting so far. And then he tells him, you know what the Chofetz Chaim did after he gave him the letter? He went to the local post office. He asked how much it cost to mail a letter from his town to the town that he was going to mail it to. They told him the amount that it cost. He asked them to sell him a stamp for that amount. They sold him a stamp. He took it, he ripped it up, he threw it in the garbage, and he left. The guy in the post office thought he was crazy. You ask how much a stamp costs, and then you rip it up. So he stopped him, and he said, "Sir, what's wrong with you?" So he told him, "Let me tell you. I had a letter that I was going to mail today from this town to that town. But then I got lucky. Somebody came to the house and was willing to take it for me. But that I got lucky doesn't mean that the local delivery business has to lose money. So I bought the stamp, so you made the money, and ripped it up, because I don't need it anymore. I already sent my letter." And he says, "Judge, that's the level of honesty that this man has." And the judge looks at him and says, "And how do I know that you're honest and that story's true? Maybe you just pulled that out of your sleeve." So he says, "Whether it's true or not, honestly, Judge, I don't know. I wasn't there. But one thing I guarantee you, stories like that, they don't say about me and you." That's how he presented his case. That's a huge lesson in life. Stories like that, they don't say about me and you. Just the fact that somebody would be able to say such a thing about the Chofetz Chaim, that alone is a huge stage in life. It's a huge accomplishment in life. So whether Peter really has an agenda with the bullpen or not, I don't know. But stupidity like that, thank God they don't say about me and you. But it bothered me, it really saddened me, this thing. Why? How did we get to a point that people are wasting time with this nonsense? I remember a few years ago, and this made an impact on me. I was on a flight going to Israel and Elal. And, Elal, they're until today, their commercial is Achiba Bait Ba'olam. Feel as home as possible. It's very true, you should know. Sometimes a very warm feeling. Other times like living in an abusive home, depending what staff you have. But it's definitely at home, one way or the other. I have to say allegedly, so nobody should be able to sue me. But one way or the other, Chiba Bait Ba'olam. Yeah. Kids, I like flying Elal when I go to Israel. It's always my preference. I want it's a Jewish airline. Let's start with that. Support your own. Number two, everything's kosher. Fly United, guy near you doesn't keep kosher, not religious Israeli. And you see him eating pork. Your guts come out. It's disgusting. How can you see a Jew doing Avera? Fly Elal, they only serve kosher, so by default everybody's eating kosher. Problem solved. You don't have to witness such things. Unbelievable thing. That's another reason. Happens to be that I also like the idea that it's a small airline and I know the whole crew and staff and I get treated well. So over the years, one of the nice things over there is that Israelis like talking. So So if you happen not to be going to sleep right at the beginning of the flight, because you have to daven Shachris in a little while or whatever, so you're not going to be bored. There's always somebody to talk to. So I have countless stories. One day, Bli Neder, if Hashem gives me the health and the strength, I'm going to write a book just from stories I have on airplanes and airports. It'll be a bunch of volumes. I don't know, many, but a bunch for sure. Unreal. So on my flights, I'm sitting. Near me, there's no seat. At the opposite side of the aisle, there's a woman sitting. Girl, woman, I don't know what the bracket is where you title who what. A female, we'll say. Oh, today that's a bad word too, so I don't know. It, whatever they want to be identified as. We took off, 20 minutes into the flight. It's time to have mincha. So Rav Wozner said, you don't make minyanim on planes and that, Chil Hashem, it's not safe also. Took a siddur out and I prayed. And she was giving me dirty looks the whole time. I didn't understand what she wanted from me. I didn't talk to her, I didn't bother her, I didn't say anything to her. I said hi when I got onto the plane, good afternoon, to be a mensch, and that was the extent of it. What's she staring at me for? I said, I'm going to stay quiet. I wanted to go to sleep after that. Then I get done davening mincha, and she says, Slicha, Adoni, אתה מדבר עברית? Excuse me, sir, do you speak Hebrew? I said, קצת, a little bit. Figured like this, if it's something interesting, I'll talk to her, and if not, I don't talk Hebrew anymore. It's too hard for me to say the words, and have a good night. So she says that she saw that I was praying, and it bothered her a lot. I said, what bothers you? You don't believe in live and let live? You don't have to pray, and I do pray. What bothered you about my prayer? I didn't stand, I didn't bother you, I didn't do it out loud. What bothered you? She said, if you pray, that means you believe in God. I said, yeah, I'm very proud of it too. She said, if you believe in God, then you should have ethics. I said, I consider myself a very ethical person. I hold myself to a very high standard of ethics, actually. I said, you don't. I said, I don't. That's a big accusation. You don't exactly know me. I said, I saw it with my own eyes. Now I'm already curious. What did she see that I didn't? I'm starting to look. Maybe my shirt's dirty. Is that? I don't know. What do you want from me? It says, when you came onto the plane, I saw you pulling out a sandwich that had meat inside. How could you eat an animal that was just murdered? She said it with so much passion, as if Mama, she was jumping out of a military plane to save some wounded soldier. Kids, I saw, there's another one of these Meshuguim. They have a movement in Israel. They call it Ten Lachayot Lichyot. Let the animals live. That's why, it's honestly, this movement in Israel started, I think, I don't know when it started in the US, but in Israel it started very early. It started in the middle of the 50s already, this Ten Lachayot Lichyot thing. And I think it's a little bit like a prophecy. They realized that one day all the secular youth are going to be a bunch of animals, so they didn't want their parents killing them, so they said Ten Lachayot Lichyot. Let the kids live. That was the idea behind it, I think. But anyway, that's the idea. So with these people, Anek Sil Kivalto, you have to answer a fool on his level. So I said, I'll tell you the truth. You are not allowed to eat meat. I could eat meat. So what does that mean? I said, from an ethical perspective, for you it's wrong, and for me it's actually right. So she said, why? Now she was interested already. I said, nothing here is going to be personal, but I'm going to tell it to you as it is. I said, let's analyze for a second. You wake up in the morning, the cow wakes up in the morning. You go to sleep at night, the cow goes to sleep at night. You eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner, the cow eats breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You make noises, talking, cow moves away. That's cow language. You're identical. I said, and you're a human, and humans have caused mass tragedies in the world, like inventing atomic warfare, dropping bombs, mass murderers, and so on. And cows never caused any harm to the world. So actually, the cow is better than you. So you can't eat the cow, because the cow is better than you. He should eat you. Simple as that. I said, but I believe that I have a neshama, and my neshama is a chedek elokam imal, is part of God. And the cow doesn't have a neshama. And therefore, he's not a Chedek Elokam Imal. So the cow wants me to eat him, so he should have a chance to be in a body that's a Chedek Elokam Imal. He said, so you're not allowed to eat the cow, and I'm allowed to eat the cow. She didn't know what to say, she was quiet. So I told her, once we're at it, on the subject, I'll tell you another reason why. So there was a story of Yaakov Kamenetsky, also very famous. This is one of the Jewish classic stories. About Victor Miller rarely said over stories from people that lived together with him, that were in his age bracket. Stories that he would quote once in a while in his speeches were from his Rabbeim or previous generations. On rare occasions, he quoted a recent, what was considered in his time a recent story. This story was he not only quoted, he actually wrote it in one of his books. Yaakov Kamenetsky was once on a plane going to Israel together with his son. Yaakov Kamenetsky was a very humble man, and he didn't fly business or first, he flew economy. He said it's a waste of money, this, that, whatever it was. So he was sitting with his son in economy, and there was three seats in the row. Him and his son was two, and then there was one other guy, not religious guy, sitting there in the third seat. It seems like this not religious guy was also flying with his son. But his son was sitting, I don't know, somewhere else. They didn't have seats together. This not religious man, is watching the two people sitting near him, and he sees the whole flight, Rabbi Yaakov's son, every few minutes, Daddy, do you need something to drink? Do you need something to eat? Can I get you something? Need help with something? He gets up to go to the bathroom, son walks him. He was older already, whatever, make sure he's okay. Respect to no end. And with love, with excitement, not because he feels he has to. Really, passion. This guy, his son doesn't come to check on him even once. And when he goes to check up on his son, he comes back in a bad mood, so it looks like it didn't work out that well. He was jealous. Why does this Haredi guy, religious guy, his son, have so much respect for him? And by me, I have to respect my son. Why? So he asked Rabbi Yaakov. So this is what Rabbi Yaakov answered him. Yaakov answered him like this. He said, your son's right and my son's right. They're both right. It's just a matter of what you were raised, how you were educated. He said, your son went to public school. My son went to yeshiva. In public school, they teach you Darwin's theory, that you evolved from a monkey. In yeshiva, they teach you Bereshit bara Elokim, that you're part of Hashem. Hashem created you and you're part of Hashem. He put in you a neshama. He said, so now let's think. If evolution's true, so your great, whatever, grandfather, however you want to term it, I like terming it that way because it's just another way of making fun of that stupidity, was a monkey. So that means your son is one generation further away from the monkey. So you have to respect him. If I'm a Chedek Elokam Imal, and now my great-grandparents were Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, I'm one generation closer to Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. So my son has to respect me. So they're both right, each one based on the way they were raised. So I told this Israeli lady, that's my second reason. I said, you're one generation closer to the cow. So you didn't evolve yet, so you can't eat cows. I'm one generation closer to God, so I can do it. There's no issue with it at all. I said, on the contrary, according to Jewish faith, God only created cows to be eaten. That was their purpose. Without that, there wouldn't be any. That was the whole point. Of course, we don't torture animals, and the whole Hilchos Shchita is based around things that make sure that the animal dies a easy death, without pain, without suffering. But the idea. So what are these? We had a long conversation, by the way, and a lot of subjects came up. And then I realized what her conviction to this craziness is. She asked me, she kept on challenging. She knew a lot about Judaism. I hope she wasn't one of these people that was a Shanav Piresh, because she knew too much. I don't know how she knew all this stuff. So she was attacking every mitzvah. Why this and why that? And this makes no sense. And that makes no sense. So amongst her attack of mitzvahs, one of the attacks on the mitzvahs was, why are you not allowed to get a tattoo? It's my body, I can do whatever I want. And lahachis, to show me, to spite, picks up her sleeve, and on his arm over here, it said, Ten lachayot lichiot, let the animals live. Chaya, no, bekitza. She wrote her name on her arm, that's what she did. Nebuch. So how does a person get to that? You know why? Not because they're bad. You know how a person gets to that? Because everybody wants to have a reason to live. Everybody wants to have a life that has some sort of meaning. And these people at Kodesh Nishbu, they were never raised with Torah. So they have no meaning in life. So they need something to feel good that I'm doing something in my life that's worthwhile, that means something. So they'll protect animals, they'll protect one protects dogs, one protects this. They'll do all different things because they need what to hold on to. The Yid wakes up in the morning, Modani Fanecha Melech Chai V'Kayam, just the fact that you're a son of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is already a reason to be alive. You don't have to look for meaning. You don't have to look for meaning. Everything's fine. We don't need to go and hold on to all these crazy ideas. We're just fine without all this craziness. Yeah. Now let's take it one step further, and I'll have a little shorter shiur than the usual, because if I came late, that's not your fault. But you'll walk away with something nice anyway. All right, so Sara passes away, and Avraham Avinu comes to bury her. So the way the pasuk writes it is, "Vatam Sara b'kiyat arba Hebron, beretz Knan, vayavo Avraham lispod lesara velivkota." She dies, Hebron. Vayavo Avraham lispod lesara velivkota. By the way, every time I read this pasuk, I remember a big nace that I had when I was a young teenager in Israel. One day, I decided for the first time, together with a friend of mine, his name was Asher Barda, we're going to go to Marat HaMachpelah to pray. He had a car, and we said, we'll drive there. Fine. Now, we had no idea where we were going. This was before the days of Waze or GPS or anything of the sort. And yeah. So we went based on what we thought was the right way. And we got to some fork, and it says left is Kiryat Arba, right is Hebron. So he turns to me and he says, Yaakov, we go left or right? I didn't know. I said, I think we go right. I said, the pasuk says, Kiryat Arba, hi Hebron. Let's go. Hebron, today there's 200 Jewish families that live there. Then there was about 4 or 5, and it's one big terrorist cell. We just pulled 1 block into there, and it started raining anything that could move. Garbage cans and rocks and this and that. Thank God it wasn't missiles, everything up to that. B'nisei nisim, Hashem Mamash protected us. Nisim and niflos, we got out of there alive. Nisim and niflos. Unbelievable. Kids, you gotta know your way around. Don't go into places. Don't get into things you don't know what you're doing. Don't have the arrogance to think you know how to get everywhere without checking. But anyway, it's Big Kiddush Hashem, this Shabbat, there's going to be thousands of Jews in Hebron. Thousands. The hospitality, 200 families, host tens of thousands, almost 10,000 people. What Kiddush Hashem it is, unbelievable. Amazing thing. But Bekitza, so right, she dies. Vayavo Avraham came, lispod lesara, to say a eulogy for Sara Yemenu, v'livkota, and to cry for her. Vayavo Avraham came, let's pay attention, because it's the Chiddush. Lispod lesara v'livkota, say a eulogy for Sarah and to cry for her. Rashi writes, the Baal HaTurim writes, the word lifkota in the Torah has a chaf ktana, a small chaf. Comes the Baal HaTurim and says, why does the lifkota have a small chaf? Because shelo bachta ela ma'at, she only cried a little bit. Lefishis keinaita, because she was an old lady. She's 127, she died at an old age, so he only cried a little bit, he didn't cry a lot. Anybody understands that here? Because I don't. I think it's just the opposite, no? Somebody died at an old age, and somebody else loved them, they had more years to love them, so it's even more painful to lose them. So they cry more, not less. Besides, it sounds a little bit unethical, cry less because they were older. If life has a value, it makes no difference at what age. And the first and simplest rayat it is from the Rambam in the Chot Rotzeach Shmirat HaNefesh. If somebody killed a person, b'meizid, with Eidim and Asro, whatever, that was 119 years old and on his deathbed. Al pi halacha, he gets the death penalty. If somebody kills a 5-year-old child, he also gets the death penalty. But that guy only had 1 minute left to live. What's the answer? That life is eternal. Eternity has unlimited value, so there's no way to say this, yeah, this, no. It's all the same. 1 times the eternity and 100 times eternity equals the same thing. I mean, life has, there's no way to put a number on its value. So, what does that mean? Avraham Avinu cried only a little bit, Chav Ktana, because Sarai Avinu was old. What does that mean? So, I saw an unbelievable pshat in a sefer called Itaneg B'Tanugim on Chumash. He writes like this. He says that why had Sara die, so Chazal say, they went to the Akedah. Avraham Avinu took Yitzchak to the Akedah. Yitzchak was the only child, Sarah's only child, that was born miraculously after all these years. Now he's 37 years old. He takes him to the Akedah. Kitzur, yeah, and he didn't tell her, by the way. And then the Satan came and told her, your son was brought up on the Akedah. He was sacrificed for God. So it's a machloket and Chazal how to understand it, but either from tsar, from pain, she died, she had a heart attack, died, or the opposite. That the Satan told her, and he didn't die. Because even God didn't want to accept him as a sacrifice. So from pain that she didn't have the schus to give up her son, Al Kiddush Hashem, Kadosh Baruch Hu, she died. But one way or the other was from pain. Kitzur, now let's analyze for a second. Avraham Avinu had 10 tests. The last test was the Akedah. It's an argument in Rishonim if the tests are Kesidran, but if they are, then the last test is definitely one of the Asar Nisayon. L'chora, it's a very big test. You're the only child. Hashem promised him also that Ki Yitzchak Yikarei L'Chazara, you're going to have children from Yitzchak. That's going to be a continuation. And now Yitzchak's dying. How does it add up with what God promised? It doesn't make sense. There was multiple facets in the dynamic of this Nisayon. But then he succeeded. He didn't bring Yitzchak. He didn't have to kill Yitzchak. Hashem told him, Al tishlach etcha lanar v'al ta'as lo mu'uma. Don't do anything to your child. Ki ata yadati ki yirei Elokim ata. Because now I know that you're Yirei Shamayim. And we write on that until this very day. All our prayers revolve around v'zocher chazdei avot u'mevi goel livnei v'neihem. Right? The schut that Avraham and Yitzchak did the Akedah together in partnership is, we write on that. We blow a shofar on Rosh Hashanah. That's what resolves our judgment issues in heaven. Why? To remind that Kadosh Baruch Hu of Elosh Shel Yitzchak Avinu. To remind them of the Akedah. Everything revolves around this Akedah. So Avraham Avinu just had a big test. And he passed the test. Finally, the test is over. He passed with flying colors. Hashem promised him such blessings, unbelievable. And he gets home, and he's so excited to bring his son back to his wife and say, thank God we passed the test, and the kid is alive and everything's well. And he walks into the house and sees his wife's dead on the floor. So the son didn't die, instead his wife died. And why'd she die? It's by had Ruach HaKodesh. Because of the Akedah. Right? Because of the Akedah. So now he has to deal with it. This was another test. It wasn't counted as one of the Asar Nisayon maybe, but it was another test. What was the test? Is he going to regret doing the mitzvah or not? Is he going to say, why did I do this? Maybe I should have shared it more with my wife, coached her into it. Maybe I should have done this, that. Not exactly the way Hashem said to do it. Look. Besides, how could something bad come out of a direct commandment from God? Right? Piatov, from God's mouth, nothing bad comes out. It looks very bad. So this is a whole new test. It's a test in Emunah. Now he has to deal with this. Then there's another part. The other part is Chil Hashem. What are people going to say? Wow, Avinu went to do Hashem's commandment. What was his reward? His wife died. Just like today, people say, every time I do the right thing, something goes wrong in my life. Tzaddik v'ralo. This is not a new question. Moshe Rabbeinu was already asked Hashem this question, as brought down in the Gemara Masechet Brachot. Memele, he says, that's what Avraham Avinu did. Let's make an interesting observation. Aleinu v'lachem, nobody should ever have to face death, ever, God forbid. But when somebody passes away, do we first give a eulogy, or do his loved ones first cry? His loved ones first cry, right? Because the second they find out about the death, they naturally burst out into tears. Half a day later, when the Chevra Kaddish is ready and they have a burial place, then they say eulogy. In the Pasuk it says the opposite. Vayavo Avraham lispod l'Sara. First he said a eulogy and then lifkota. Why did we confuse it? I always said he ordered backwards. That's not the way it works. Elamai, Avraham Avinu, when his wife died, said to himself, now Hashem's testing me again, and I have to pass the test. But in this test, there's two parts to it. There's one part of if I'm going to regret doing the Akedah, and there's another part how I'm going to present the case to there was no Jewish nation then, but to the people who learned to believe in God for me, that God's not evil. So Avraham, Lispod Sara Livkota comes to Balaturim and says a small chaf. He said one of the things is that I'm going to say she was old, that she wasn't well, and she didn't die because of the Akedah, and I'm going to downplay it, I'm going to show them that I'm not crying much. And therefore he didn't allow himself to cry before the hesped because he wanted the hesped to be strictly intellectual. So the people shouldn't take out of it an emotional complaint kaviyachol against Borei Olam. That's the way Avraham Avinu passed the test. Unbelievable. Dor Pavarsky Zitzal used to bring this down a lot, this idea, a little bit different, but the same idea. And he said, that's why we have to learn Emunah from Avraham Avinu. So when a person goes so far for God, he's willing to sacrifice everything, his own son. And what's the reward he got? He lost his wife. To stay a Bal Emunah after that is almost impossible. So that's a big mussar that we got to take out of the parasha. But that you could do if your life means something. If you understand there's a higher purpose, so then you have an answer why things don't make sense to you. But if there's no higher purpose, then everything has to make sense to you. And the day it doesn't, you're depressed. That's the difference between living a life with meaning and a life without meaning. A life with meaning is a life that has a higher purpose. A life without meaning is a life that doesn't have a higher purpose. And I'm ending off with a story because I love the story. That's the only real reason. We'll try to connect it somehow, but it doesn't have to connect, but it's a good story. This is an amazing story. One of the great Rashi Yeshivot that lived until he was killed during World War II was Rabbi Chanan Wasserman, Zecher Tzadik Kadosh Livracha. Zechtor Yagen Aleinu. Shiva Abranovich, Talmid of Chafetz Chaim. Gaon Olam, Gaon in Torah and Iran and everything else. No way to describe. He could have been saved from the war. He was away from where the Jews were getting killed. But he went back because he said, if my students are going to die, I'm going to die with them. I'm not going to abandon ship in time of crisis in simple English. So it's not just he died al Kiddush Hashem. He voluntarily died al Kiddush Hashem. There's a whole new level. There's no way to explain this at all. Zocher, that is Torah, there's limited Sfarim from him because most of it was lost, but whatever it was, like Kovetz Shiurim and Kovetz Ma'arim or whatever, these are Sfarim that no yeshiva boy goes 24 hours without learning. He explains all the hard sugiyot in Shas, especially in Masechet Yevamot. The kids, Rabbi Chanan had yeshiva, which at the height had 400 boys. I know today 400 doesn't sound like a lot, because Baruch Hashem, Lakewood has like 10,000, and Mia is like 8,000 or whatever it is by now. But in Europe, that was the biggest yeshiva. There was no such thing. The Yeshivat Chachmei Lublin that at one point had, whatever. Chafetz Chaim in his yeshiva had the biggest number that anybody wrote in any book, I think, is 80. But I think that's a very exaggerated figure, based on what I understand. Because if there was 80 people at it consistently, in Radin Yeshiva, then there should have been so many more Talmidim of the Chafetz Chaim. So just for that reason alone, I'm not sure that that's so precise. I'm not saying for sure, because I don't know, but I'm just expressing something that might be worth thinking about. But anyway, Branovich at one point had 400. Most of the time they had much less, but at one point it was 400. And a yeshiva, 400 students, you got to feed 400 boys. It's a lot of money. And money then wasn't like today, that they print it and give it out for free. Especially if you're a non-productive member of society. You had to actually work for it. Yeshiva boys didn't work, nor did Rebbe Chonon work, so nobody had money. So now there's a problem. We got 400 mouths to feed and no money. That don't work. So Rebbe Chonon used to go raise money in all different places. We would travel. Back then travel was a real pain. It wasn't like today. Well, now with the masks it's also kind of a pain, but if we take that fact away. I don't remember if I said this last week, but this is my new system. It works. And I'm on a plane, if I take off my mask and the flight attendant comes over to me, I say I identify myself as a person who's wearing a mask. Legally, they're not allowed to say a word after that. I identify myself as a person who's wearing a mask. I have a built-in mask into my face. Identified. That's it. Anei ksil kivalto. Answer a fool like his stupidity. That's what the pasuk says. Answer stupidity with stupidity. Kitzur, Chonin used to travel. It was hard for him. No one was physically hard to travel, whatever. But more than that, he had to leave his Talmidim. Chonin lived to be with the Talmidim. Now he has to leave, to go, to schlep, to come, to go. One point, the situation was very bad. Really no more, like worse than ever. And he tried, he went to Russia, he went here, there. He didn't succeed to raise money. It wasn't working. And it's either send the boys back home or figure something out. So Chonin decided to make what was considered a very extreme move back then, and to come to America to raise money. Coming to America to raise money was a bunch of months' story, because it was almost over a month. It took over a month just to get here. Multiple trains, then a boat, then more trains. Kitzur. It's a whole story. And then once he's here, he's going to be here for a little while, and then the whole month to get back. So he blocked out a half a year to go to America to salvage the yeshiva. There's no choice. Kitzur, this is after going to Russia and Poland, and nothing worked. He already exhausted all his options. He went here, he went there, nothing doing. Comes to America. He says he's going to go to America. He parts from his students. He tells them he's going to be away for at least a half a year, maybe even up to a year. He's going to America. He hopes by the time he comes back, he'll come back with so much money, we'll solve the problem with yeshiva, and he'll be able to stay. He won't have to travel anymore. And like this, for a week he's on trains, and then on a boat for 3 weeks in the ocean, and with all the discomforts of seasickness and this and that and that. Not a pleasant experience. Finally, they see the shores of the Golden Land, America. All right, that's what people used to imagine. Till today, to some Israelis, they fantasize the money grows here on trees. Or it definitely feels like that based on the amount of times they knock on the door asking you to pay for their kids' apartments. They call it a chasat kala, same idea. The Israeli version of chasat kala is buy my kid an apartment. But, yeah, by the way, if I'm on the subject, I have to share with you something. This is very unfortunate, but an Israeli financial newspaper spent a lot of time, money, and effort investigating non-for-profit organizations in Israel. I say this with a lot of pain and a lot of shame. And out of the 10 biggest Haredi, quote-unquote, non-for-profit organizations in Israel, I don't want to say names because Lashon Hara, but you can look it up online on your own if you want to know, just to protect yourself. The highest amount of a percentage of the money that you donate when you get one of these flyers promising you miracles that actually goes to charity, the highest amount of any of them was 8%. The average was 2.5%. That means when you donate $100 to one of these miracle stories, give $100, if Chaim Kanievsky promised you something, which never happened either, by the way. So you gave $2.50 to charity and 98.5 and 97.5 to advertisement and plane tickets and executive salaries. That's the reason, by the way. I knew that. I didn't know it was that extreme. I thought it was about 50-50. But I knew that this is what's going on for years. That's why I started my foundation. So I can't live like that. By me, there's no such thing. A dollar has to be a dollar. 100 pennies, not 1 cent less, no matter what. Scary. But anyway, Yaakov came to America. Finally sees the shores of America. And he had already sent a telegram in advance that he's coming with the estimated date that he's coming. I guess there was some sort of way to track when boats come. And there was a Yid, we know his name, Rabbi Yosef Eliyahu Antel. He knew Rabbi Elchanan was coming at this day, this time. He said he's going to go wait by the shore, by the dock, to greet Rabbi Elchanan to bring him. Elchanan came, he greeted him, unbelievable, Kodesh Kodashim. And he, every day, would take Rabbi Elchanan to shuls to speak, to try to raise money. So a lot of famous stories about Rabbi Elchanan from the period that he was in America. One of the famous stories about Rabbi Elchanan when he was in America is, by the way, is applicable for some of us that still work in Manhattan. He used to take Rabbi Elchanan to Manhattan. People had offices there to raise money. And once they were driving and they went through Times Square. And when they went, and Rabbi Elchanan had his eyes closed the entire time. He never wanted to open his eyes so he shouldn't see priestess or goyim. And Rabbi Elchanan started screaming, "You took me to the gate of Gehenna, get me out of here." And this was Times Square before World War II, not like today. Now it's Gehenna itself, not just the door of Gehenna, it's Gehenna itself. It used to be the door. Now, you want to know what hell looks like? Go to Times Square. That's what it looks like. That's by the way. But he went, back then, there was no awareness for donating money to yeshivas. There was no awareness. It's a fact. It might be sad to admit, but that's the way it was. That's why the yeshivot in Europe, pre-war, were very poor. People, it's hard to say this because it's embarrassing, but it's true. People actually deliberately did not give money to yeshivot because they felt that they were raising generations of parasites. They don't have a trade, a profession, they're not going to work, they won't be productive members of society, but all this nonsense. And by the way, that's why there was so few yeshiva students back then, because almost every yeshiva boy had trouble getting married because no girl wanted to marry him because she knew that she's deemed for a life of poverty. She wasn't willing to do it. Till today, they're idiots to think that way, by the way. There's a very famous story. My ADHD, I sidetrack a little bit, sorry. There's a very famous story of Rabbi Pian, that a boy came to him in the yeshiva and told him, this was already in Israel, told him he's leaving, hey, thank you very much for everything, whatever, but I'm leaving. So Rabbi Pian told him, why are you leaving? You're learning so good. He said, I'm going to college. He said, what do you lose over there? So he said, I need to get a degree. So what do you need a degree for? I said, what do you mean? Parnosa, I have to make money. He said, what do you need money for? I said, I'm going to get married, I'm going to have kids, and I'm going to have to support them. It's an obligation. So I'm going to go now to college, I'll get a degree, I'll get married, I'll be able to support my kids. So Rabbi told him, okay, I agree with you. So he said, can I get a blessing? He said, sure, but first I have to ask you a few questions. He said, okay, Rabbi, what questions do you have to ask? He said, who said you're going to wake up tomorrow morning? The boy heard that coming out of the mouth of Rabbi Pian. He almost didn't continue living that day. Forget about the next morning. He said, Rabbi, don't curse me. What are you doing? He said, I didn't curse you. I'm just asking. Who said you're going to wake up tomorrow morning? So he told him, Hashem Yazo. Hashem's going to help. He said, and who says if you wake up tomorrow morning, you're not going to wake up paralyzed in half your body? Hashem Yazo. And who says if you go to college, you're going to do well? Maybe you'll fail all your classes. Hashem Yazo. And who says that after you graduate, you'll actually get a job? I know a lot of people, that, especially in California, that have a lot of fancy degrees that are worthless and don't have jobs. Hashem Yazo. And who says that once you get a job, you're going to find a wife? Maybe no girl's going to be interested in you, not going to want to marry you. Hashem Yazo. And who says once you get married, you're going to stay married? Many people get married, then it falls apart right away. Hashem Yazo. Who says if it does last, you can have children? Hashem Yazo. Who says they're going to live, that they're going to even need food? Also Hashem Yazo. So Abeli pauses and looks at him and tells him, aha. So Hashem could help that you should wake up tomorrow morning. Hashem could help that you should wake up healthy tomorrow morning. Hashem could help that you should get into a school. Hashem could help that you should pass school and get good grades. Hashem could help that you should get a degree. He could also help that you should find a job. He could also help that your job pays you money. He could also help that you find a wife. He could also help that your wife stays married to you. He could also help that she gets pregnant, that she has children, and the children are healthy. But he can't help that you should have a few dollars in your bank account. There he lost his control, and you have to leave yeshiva in order to take control instead of him. How does that make sense? And the boy stayed in yeshiva, and today he's still alive, and he's one of the Rashi Yeshivot in Eretz Yisrael. Shem Sender for Shlema. He's very old and he's not well this week. Unbelievable Maisa. Hashem can help up to, but when it comes to money, that's where God's power ran out. Over there, he can't help anymore. Kids, Rabbi Chanan goes from place to place, and then there was this attitude of, what, yeshiva boys, they're parasites, we don't give them money to help yeshivas. So he didn't give it, no, they're not giving you money. So now he came all the way to America. This was the last ditch effort to save the yeshiva, and nobody's giving money. I'm giving him but pennies, nothing that could help. When this Abi Yosef Eliyahu Antil said over the story, he said that it was a point that they calculated Rabbi Chanan didn't even raise enough money that would cover the boat ticket. Even that much he didn't get to. Forget about money for the yeshiva. Zero. Wasn't working. And this guy is trying to brainstorm, what could he do? Rabbi Chanan's name was Rabbi Chanan Wasserman. One day, he comes to Rabbi Chanan and he tells him, listen, I have an interesting thing going on. I want to discuss. So you decide what you want to do about it. He says, there is a gentleman who lives in Manhattan. And his name is Pinchas Wasserman. So, but today he doesn't call himself Pinchas Wasserman anymore. He calls himself Philip Gottstein. I don't know how you go from Wasserman to that. Lo yodea. Tells him, Pinchas, Philip, maybe Gzer Shava, PP, whatever, something. But the other part I really don't get. And if you're so anti-Jewish and you want to change your name, at least change it to a non-Jewish name. Don't make it more Jewish. Gottstein sounds a lot more Jewish than Wasserman. So it was just a bad calculation. But anyway, these are the facts. That's why I'm saying it. He says he's the biggest manufacturer in the whole United States of coats. And he's extremely wealthy. So maybe you're related to him. Maybe not. But either way, you have the same last name as him. And maybe he'll give you money. He said, I don't think so, because he used to be religious, and he left religion, and he's known to be stingy and hate yeshivas. But if you want to try, I'm willing to take you. Rabbi Chanan heard the name Pinchas Wasserman, and he says, I know him. He's not my relative, but we learned the Chayei together. Learned the Chayei together, Hafel. Okay, I'm going to him. But you don't just walk into a CEO, it doesn't work like that, right? So they call to get an appointment. And the secretary doesn't even transfer the call. She hears a rabbi, he's not interested in rabbis, click. They try again, the third time. Finally, this Antel reaches out, somehow gets through to this dude himself. He tells him, Rabbi Chanan Wasserman's here from Branovich. He wants to see you. Are you willing to meet him? He said, Rabbi Chanan? Sure, I want to meet him. He was my classmate. You should come this minute. Bring him over right away. Anytime. Just walk in. I'm going to tell my whole staff. When he comes in, everything stops. Straight to me. No. He comes back to Rabbi Chanan all excited. He tells the Rabbi, maybe there's a Yeshua, maybe a Ness. He's so excited to see you. Chanan goes into him. And they start talking. You remember me? You remember me? And they reminisce childhood memories. The Rebbe and the Cheder and this and that. Kids. What was back in the day, as they say. Like this, it goes on for a few hours. At the end of a few hours, Rabbi Chanan tells him, it was nice to meet you. I'm so happy we caught up. But he left, didn't ask him for a dollar. As Rabbi Chanan was walking out, he escorts him out. There's his friend from his childhood. And he tells him, Rabbi, how much longer are you in America? He said, a little bit, a few more weeks maybe. He said, maybe you should come back, visit me again. I said, fine. Comes back a few days later, Rabbi Chanan, and he tells him, Rabbi, listen, you know why I told you to come back? I couldn't continue the conversation then. But I know you must have came for a reason. You didn't come to America for no reason. So what happened? You're sick? Because people used to come from medical treatment. So you said, I'll help you. I know all the doctors in the world. You need money for something. I'm a rich man. I'll give you money. You need it. Chazal says, no. I didn't come for it. I'm fine. So he says, so what'd you come for? So Chanan takes his jacket. And he shows him that one of the two buttons over here is missing. He says, I came because I need a button. And you're the biggest coat manufacturer in the world, so you have the best buttons, not like by me and Branovich, the weak buttons that break. He takes off his jacket and he hands it to the big CEO and he says, could you get somebody, please do me a favor, sew my button. And this Pinchas Wasserman looks at Elchanan and he says, you were an Ilu, you're a genius, you're not retarded. Nobody comes to America to sew a button. Spent 3 weeks in the ocean, a week on trains for a button. He said, I'll get your button fixed, don't worry about it right now, but he says, that's all I need. He gets his button fixed. Elchanan blesses him with all these blessings, how amazing, what a favor he did for him, he saved him, mamish, unbelievable. Oh, now I can go back to Europe. A couple of days later, this Pinchas Wasserman was not sleeping at night. He got in, oh, what's with this Chunke, his friend, Elchanan? He went crazy. Calls him back to the office again. He's arguing with him, pleading, begging. Tells him, you're not going to get away with this. It ain't going to help, Rabbi. What did you come to America for? Tells him, I already told you. I came to America to sew a button, and you fixed it for me. Thank you for sewing my button. And he tells Rabbi Elchanan, Lo ba'im la'Amerika litfol kaftorim. Nobody comes to America to sew buttons. When this went on for the third time, this conversation already, meaning the fourth time Rabbi Elchanan met him, Rabbi Elchanan asked him, why not? You keep on telling me you don't come to America to sew a button. Why not? I'm telling you that's what I came for. Why not? He says, what do you mean? A button costs whatever, 10 cents. Back then, probably a lot less than that, actually. A boat ticket and this and that is thousands of dollars. A button takes 30 seconds to sew on. To get to America is at least a month there, at least a month back. Nobody spends a month there and a month back and thousands of dollars for something that takes 30 seconds and costs 10 cents. And when he told that to Rabbi Elchanan told him, no, so listen to what you just said. Chazal say, that in Shamayim there's 7 Rikiim. Each Rakia is 500 light years long. Between each Rakia there's a distance of 500 light years long. Then on top of the 7 Rikiim is the Kisei HaKavod. The Neshama comes down to the world from the Kisei HaKavod. So Hashem sent the Neshama into you 14,000 light years down. An entire journey. ובן אדם לא מגיע לאמריקה לתפור כפתורים. You understand that from Europe, 3 weeks I wouldn't come to sew a button, and you came all the way from Kisei HaKavod, 7 Rikiim, 1,000 years each, 7,000, sorry, years in total, to sew buttons. That's what you came to the world for? To sew coats? What's with you? And Pinchas started crying. And he told Rabbi Elchanan, you're right. I lost my way. I lost the right path. And he turned to Rabbi Elchanan and said, I'm asking for a favor. It's been many, many years I didn't learn Gemara. Would you sit with me now and open a Gemara and we'll learn a Daf Gemara? Rabbi Elchanan jumped on the opportunity. Rabbi Elchanan loved learning. There was that was the best thing that could happen to him. And he sat and he learned with him a sugya. And he brought him back to his childhood memories of the good days in the yeshiva when they used to sit and learn. And then when they got done learning for that day, he told Rabbi Elchanan, I enjoyed it so much, I have to start learning. As soon as Rabbi Elchanan heard it from his mouth, those words, I have to start learning, the first thing he did when he left his office was make an arrangement that a big Talmid Chacham should go to him every day in the office and learn with him. So he shouldn't lose the momentum. And once he already had a Talmid Chacham and he started learning a few days, he called Rabbi Elchanan again to say thank you, and then he told him, no, and now can you tell me why you came to America? So he told him, I have a yeshiva and there's no money. So Pinchas paid for 2 full years of all the expenses of the yeshiva. That's how Banovich lasted until it fell apart when they were murdered by the war. The last 2 years, he paid for. 400 students, the biggest yeshiva back then. That's called having purpose and meaning in life. You wake up in the morning, you got to ask yourself, did Hashem send my neshama back from Kisei HaKavod today for what? To sew another button? To make another dollar? To do another stupid thing? Kavachomer, to do more averos? אף השון, כי אדם לא בא לאמריקה לתפור כפתורים. No such thing. Can't be. And then, if you have an answer to the question, so what did I come back to this world for? Why did Hashem give me back my neshama? Then you're going to have a happy life, because you have meaning. And if not, you're going to be busy not wanting in baseball that they should have a bullpen and fighting about animals. Ten lachayot lichyot. Don't be a chaya. V'tatchil lichyot. That's the real answer to that. Al tiyeh chaya v'tatchil lichyot. And then you could eat chayot, everything's fine. Yesterday, Baruch Hashem, I had a big steak, cowboy, I think it was called. The whole L'Shem Yichud. Why not? Probably a gilgul of a neshama in there. Masakin, it made a bracha and everything. It was good. It's important. Why not? The level of Rebbe itself, I was by him once over here. I used to come to America for 1 or 2 months a year, on and off. He would hide out in Basewater or the different places. He didn't want people to bother him. He'd come to have peace over here. So once he called me for some reason, and that's how I developed a relationship with him. At that point, I didn't know who he was. Only then I had learned that he's a Malach Hashem Tzorkus. He used to smoke. It was a funny thing. He had boxes and cartons and cartons of cigarettes behind him on the shelf. He would look, he would pull out one carton, out of that pull out a pack, open a pack, pull out one cigarette, light it and smoke, and throw the rest of the carton to the garbage. A lot of money. Back then it was, at the time that he was alive, it was about $40 a carton. Today it's already 100 or something. So I asked him straight out. I said, Rebbe, it's about tashchis first of all. And number two, why? So he tells me, no, it's smoke. Smoke is not healthy. He said, but some neshamas come in a gilgul and tobacco and they need a tikkun. So I pick out the cigarettes that need a tikkun and the rest I throw away. You hear? It's a man who lived just till a few years ago. Unbelievable. That's a person with purpose. Even the food he ate, everything had a purpose. He's doing something bigger than the physical elements of things. He's living a higher life, a more productive life. He's living something bigger and better. Unbelievable. Nobody should have any demyonis today that anybody alive in this generation knows how to tell. If anybody thinks anything like that, then he's nuts. It's begeda what I said a few times from Chaim Kanievsky, right? That there's a very famous story that he had one morning he woke up and he told his grandson that he wants to make a siyum. A siyum he makes Erev Pesach. Kitzu, he made a siyum. They asked him, what's the siyum on? He said, the whole Torah. Bavli, Ushalmi, Sifro, Sifri, everything. He said, Saba, that you do Erev Pesach. This is not Erev Pesach. He says, last night when he was asleep, in his dream, he learned the whole Torah. Making a siyum. That was a story that became very famous. It makes a good story, no? It's true, by the way. I verified it. It's unbelievable. Kid's a one call guy. A few months later, went into Chaim, he has a halacha question. So what's the halacha question? He said, last night when I was sleeping, I learned the whole Torah in a dream. Do I have to make a siyum? So Chaim told him, if you learned the whole Torah in a dream, you have to make a siyum, but in a dream also. Kids, that's the difference between normal people and Bali Demyonis. So yeah, today we don't have that. But somebody who has a real purpose, Lamaisa, Chazal says clearly that, yeah, there's a big, big thing. Why do we fish Friday night? It's tzaddikim. The neshama, if they have to come back to the world for a tikkun, comes back and fish. So on Shabbos, there's a bigger tikkun for neshamas because it's also Suda Shabbos besides for a regular Suda. So therefore, the tzaddikim of the schus that we fish Friday night, so we bring up. We see that you can live a life that every little thing that you're doing has a huge purpose and a huge meaning, unbelievable thing. And there's no ifkerus, it's not a joke. You've got to take life seriously a little bit once in a while. Of course, happy and everything, but I have to take life seriously. Somebody called me and told me a story that I verified from every way, shape, or form. It's 100% precise. It happened last week. You should never know. Last week there was a very big tragedy in Israel. There were many, but amongst the many, unfortunately, there was one guy in Laman, Talmid Chacham. I didn't know who he was, but now I know who he is. I did a lot of due diligence about him. Who was walking on the street, and a kid was on an electric scooter, banged into him. He fell, and his head hit exactly the corner of the curb of the sidewalk, and he died on the spot. It's a double tragedy. This kid became a murderer, even though, legally he's not. It was an accident, but he's still, the rest of his life he's going to have to live with that he killed somebody. That's a death sentence practically. And this guy, Talmid Chacham, young guy, wife, children, everything died young. No, I haven't 2.5 weeks ago, sorry. Shalom Hashem should say enough to the Tzorah Klal Yisrael. But listen to something crazy. Somebody called me about this story. I heard the story just without knowing who it was. I heard a story like that happened in Israel. I was very horrified by it, and that was that. One day somebody calls me about the story, and I was sure he's calling, they're probably raising money for the Almana. No, it's a big mitzvah. So he tells me, no, they don't need. Some American Jew heard about the story, was very shaken up. He right away called the family, and he said, the rest of your life, it's all on me. Don't worry about it. Everything's covered. So I said, nobody calls me without a reason, right? You didn't call to share with me gossip. So so if it's not money, so what is the story? He said, I called to share with you a story. The guy who called me is the nephew of this guy who died. He tells me like this. Says that his uncle, meaning the person that passed away, came during the Shiva in a dream to his brother. It's alive. Shibadel Chaim Tovim. And he said, I'm begging you to do me a favor. I came to Shamayim. Everything's 100% clean. Really, I have a very good place in Gan Eden. But they're not letting me in because a few years ago, I borrowed 10,000 shekel from somebody and I didn't get a chance to pay him back yet. Please go and pay him back. No, not 10, sorry, 1,000 shekel. 1,000 shekel from somebody. Please go and pay him back. Brother wakes up. He didn't know what to make of this. So he goes to the wife. In the middle of Shiva. He says, your husband owes money to anybody? So my husband never took money, never borrowed money. Nothing that I know of. So it was weird. She says, it's just the opposite. Even though we were a Kollel family, we weren't poor. We used to lend money to people. So he tells the wife, but your husband came to me in a dream and said he has a problem. I'm not letting him into Gan Eden, over 1,000 shekel that he owes. And he says, you want to know who he owes it to? He told me who also? To your brother. I mean, to a brother-in-law. I said, could it be? She said, why are you talking to me? Call the brother-in-law. Find out. They call the brother-in-law down, and he doesn't tell him he had a dream, whatever. He wants to see what's going on. So he tells him, did my brother owe you any money? They said, no. So you sure? He said, I had once a funny incident with him, but it's not alone. I said clearly that I forgive him and whatever. He said, what was the incident? He said, your brother lent me 1,000 shekel. I needed money for Yontif. And right after Yontif, I had money, I got paid, whatever, from the kollel. I had 1,000 shekel. I went back to him, I gave him the money. He was in the middle of learning. He didn't pay attention, put the money in his pocket, and continued. A few months later, he came to me and said, by the way, you owe me 1,000 shekel, maybe you want to pay me back. I realized that he didn't know that I paid him. He didn't pay attention, I paid him back. I didn't want to embarrass him, so I took out 1,000 shekel from my pocket, I gave it to him, and I said it should be a gift. I'm giving him a gift. But the Maisa, he didn't think it was a gift. He thought he was claiming a debt. So in Shamayim, they held him accountable for the 1,000 shekel, and that was holding him from going into Gan Eden. So the brother-in-law said, but I gave it to him as a gift. So I don't understand what the problem is. So the wife said, nah, gift, no gift. Here's 1,000 shekel right now. Take it and say clearly that you're moichel and chiluk gemura, and nothing ever happened, and you got your money back and everything's okay. Kachava. And that night, the brother came back a second time to his brother in a dream and said, thank you very much. I was led into Gan Eden. Kids, life's not hefka. And it's kedai. It's kedai to have a life that has some purpose and has some meaning to it, and do something productive with yourself. Because one day we all need to come to Hashem and He's going to ask us, did I send you to America to sew buttons? That's not the purpose. There's something bigger and better. Shabbat shalom v'ach. All the best.